To call the meeting to order, and we have several vacancies tonight, so Charles, would you like to sit for one of the many vacancies we have?
Sure.
But we have no public hearing, so we're moving on to old business. Application number 17-26 of Gerald Toner, Director of Culture, Parks and Recreation, applicant, Town of Simsbury, owner for the construction of 2 basketball courts at the Simsbury Farms Recreation Complex at the property located at 100 Old Farms Road, Zone R40. Good evening, Gerald. Would you like to present?
Good evening, and thank you for hearing our application, considering our application. Just some background on this project. It's stated in the application that's for 2 basketball courts at the Simsbury Farms Recreation Complex. And going back in 1998, I should go back, the complex opened in 1972. And in the mid to late 90s, certain parts of the infrastructure in certain areas were starting to hit their life expectancy. And it was the feeling of the Park and Rec Commission and the Simsbury Farms Complex Committee that a master plan should be undertaken to look at the next 25 years of the complex. That plan was completed in 1998, and some of the projects identified in there included the reconstruction of the ice rink, reconstruction of the golf course clubhouse, construction of a new golf course and park maintenance facility, and probably the single biggest project was the reconstruction of the pool rink building, the main building. The one project that was identified and was not completed were the basketball courts. And where the courts are proposed, some of you may remember, there were 2 tennis courts originally, and actually right when I believe if not part of the original construction, shortly thereafter. If you go up there, you can still see the light poles that are there. In the late 80s, the courts are in disrepair. Tennis play in general had declined, and the selectmen decided at that time not to put the funding into renovating those courts. So they were pretty much demolished and left in that state, and they're currently overgrown. So it made sense that there were a number of folks, and particularly when we went through the public hearings, a number of people felt strongly that basketball courts would be a good amenity for the complex. And so they were included in the master plan, and to date, that's the one project that has not been completed. This earlier went to the Board of Selectmen. The project went to the Board of Selectmen and was referred to planning for 8-24 approval, which was a few weeks back. They unanimously endorsed it. Coincidentally, and we also have a donor who stepped forward that wants to contribute towards this project. The town's also has park improvement money to help complete it. So that's how the project got to this point. Obviously, we're adjacent. I'm going to say the construction area is within 30 feet of a wetland area. Been working, Mike. I think you have Mike's staff report. The firm of Malone and McBroom have been retained to give us preliminary design. I believe also that we have a questionnaire that they helped complete. So that's where we are now. And I'd certainly be glad to answer any questions you might have. And I should mention Adam Kessler, who's our assistant town engineer, has also been working along with us on the project, is here to help answer any questions.
When is the proposed construction date?
Upon approval, we hope to try and have it out to bid in late February, mid to late February, with the idea of getting the bids in by mid to late March and construction starting in early spring, which would optimistically give it a completion date of early to midsummer, if possible.
It looks like there's a vegetated buffer between the wetlands and the court.
Yeah,
is that right?
There is, yeah.
What is it? What's there?
You know, it's a bank,
Yeah.
as far as I can, and it's overgrown right now. I think the idea would probably be to, leave it more in its natural state as opposed to actively, mowing it, or, that would be my guess. And part of I think the way the courts are aligned, having them run, it would be north and south would probably preclude any of the, the play going into into that area. Good for a lot of reasons, I think, but yeah, so that was the intent there.
Yeah. Is it, so it's like low brush?
Yeah.
No, it's, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that was my only concern was, lost basketballs going in there. And
Understood.
A lot of foot traffic.
And really, one of the designs actually had the courts running would be east and west, which would have
Yeah, that
contributed
would
to
be
that.
much
And
worse, yeah.
That was one of the, I think, the things we said, let's get it going the other way to, to prevent that, so.
Right.
Point well taken. Yeah.
And actually, Jerry, just to clarify, in your packets on sheet SP, those show the courts going east-west. So the hoops have changed.
Oh,
They
sorry,
still-
we actually have an updated.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Mike,
they're
right.
looking at it where the hoops will be facing towards the wetlands. Those hoops now, as Jerry was kind of indicated, they've been moving now on the two ends, so you won't
Yeah.
have stray shots.
Here's the screen out here, and then this way,
Okay.
if you want to pass that around. Sure.
And that change to the configuration was a result of our meeting with the consultant and identifying a potential long-term issue by facing the courts east-west. Not only that, you had the sun glare issues that'd be associated with it in that orientation.
It's a pretty flat area now,
It is,
so
yeah,
there's no fill or it's just leveling and
exactly.
it's hardly any leveling.
Yeah.
One of Mike's comments in his staff report was about dewatering and
Yeah.
potential need to do that.
Right.
Did you take a look at that guidance that he says he provided? Didn't see it?
Yeah, so I'll go over with the commission. What we were talking about is, as you may recall in the manual, is creating a containment area with staked hay bales, fabric down, and basically should they encounter saturated soils, there's an area where these soils can decant before they're removed, if they're removed from site, because they're going to take the unsuitables and then bring in new material to use as an appropriate base for the court. And Jerry, I mean, that's one thing that we said, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're in agreement that would be shown on the plan should it be needed. The concern I raised that was that during the construction of the tennis courts, we experienced some drainage issues, upgrading of where these courts will be located. So it's just a preventative measure to make sure it's on the plans. So should the contractor encounter a saturated situation, there's a plan on how to appropriately deal with it, rather than, the project stopped and everyone's saying, what do we do next? So, and I used just the simple diagrams that are in the 2002 DEP ENS manual. It's pretty straightforward.
Do you think there's still old pieces of the old court out there?
I don't, not the top layer, the asphalt, I think was removed. I think what's left there is just, the subgrade, because you got pretty good vegetation growing there. I believe, my recollection, this goes back a ways, is that top layer, the top asphalt and coating layer was taken out, and it was just left as natural material.
Mm-hmm.
The existing sub-base and subgrade was left.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Any other questions? Any other questions? All right, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that, sorry, I'm drawing a blank. I'll let Jim do it today.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we find that this is a regulated activity because the construction is within the upland review area.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye. I'll make a motion that we find that this is not a significant activity because the activity is outside the wetland and appropriate erosion and sediment control measures will be used as part of the construction of the project.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I make a motion that we approve the application, subject to the standard conditions and special conditions in the staff report.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, moving on to new business, receipt of new application.
We don't have any applications for next month.
Right. And in February, are we planning on having a workshop?
That was the plan.
That's good.
I'll confirm with the town attorney and the director.
Let's see, moving on to general commission business. Approval of minutes for January 2nd, regular meeting. Does anyone have any comments on those minutes? All right, there being none, we will file them. And then we're moving on to the forest management discussion workshop. I know Don is not able to be here. He did send in some comments. It's not my plan to, I don't think we're going to come to any decision tonight, so I think we'll just have a discussion. And why don't we start with public audience? Do we have any? Yes?
I'll say something really quick. Sorry I had to jump out of your meeting last meeting.
You're feeling better?
I'm feeling much better. Not any better looking, but I'm feeling much better. But I did want to let everybody know how much I appreciate all the effort you're putting into the forest management plan. And I think you're going to get to a good place. What it sounds to me like you're going to do is end up with what I will call different levels or different possibilities for the different sites. And I think that's a good thing because I am a big believer that one size does not fit all. And doing different things in different areas because you're going to use them differently, I think is a very good thing for the residents of town. So, having said that, I'll shut up because it is going to snow at some point tonight. At all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Would anyone like to start? I know tonight we were planning on sort of taking a look at the Onion Mountain plan, seeing how it sort of fit with, oh, I'm sorry, yes.
I had some comments too. I'm John Schaefer, Lockbrook Road. It seems logical to me if the town is presently preparing an RFP for the preparation of a master plan for all of its open space, that the philosophy and goals for the forest open space portion should be prepared as part of the master plan. It would be imprudent to proceed with an irreversible decision at this time without knowing what the master plan guidance will be. I would like to suggest that you recommend to the Board of Selectmen that no action be taken on the Onion Mountain Forest Management Plan until the town-wide master plan is completed.
Thank you.
That has a comment too, which is indisposed.
All right, we'll come back to her then. Yeah. It is interesting that we are doing the town open space, and one of the things I know I've been recommending, or other people and the audience members have been recommending, is taking that sort of higher level approach to looking at the various sites so that we know what we're dealing with. Helen, would you like to make a comment?
You're looking at me, but are you talking at me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry.
I understand you would like to make a comment tonight.
Oh, did you already have it? Did you?
I spoke.
Okay,
Mike
thank you.
spoke and I spoke.
Excuse me. Thank you. I guess I better go over here and put my book down. Thank you for your patience. So, good evening. I'm going to read a message to you tonight. It's a message from me. Written to the members of the Conservation Commission, Helen Peterson, 20 Longview Drive. As a member of the Open Space Committee since its inception in year 2000, and as Selectman Co-Chair of the Open Land Preservation Subcommittee, deliberating during prior years of the late 1990s, that's when all that was happening, I'm speaking to you tonight as a participant observer during all of those 20-plus years. Since your last meeting, even with all my historical perspective, I remained puzzled as to why this commission might seemingly be struggling or having difficulty in your discussions of philosophy, stewardship policy, goals, to set a path going forward. Now, that's my perception. You've been working very hard, and I see a lot of progress. But in my incessant mulling, I turned again to my propensity to review all the meeting minutes, and bingo, my thinking began to unravel for me. In my mind, I understand now how and why the difficulty. I determined for myself that gross errors and missteps in our actions occurred over the years. So with your indulgence, I respectfully request to share these revelations with you. During those 20-plus years, the town was successfully conserving our valuable natural resources. And as we were becoming landowners, we established a program of preservation to govern and guide our ethic of conservation. And it was adopted in the late 1990s. It's all in here. The Open Space Committee was established in year 2000 by charter to administer an open space fund, but also it was presumed to oversee the program that's in this binder. The Open Space Committee is chaired by the First Selectman, and the preservation program resides in the office to this day. It's not quite as heavy as this. This has a lot of my notes over the years, so it's not that forbidding. It's not that difficult to read through. Now, I think this book should be used as a handbook for each and every caretaker to follow. The concern regarding stewardship was always in the forefront of all our discussions through those years, but something was missing. The error that I think happened. We were very remiss once we finished this program in our responsibility for further due diligence, and we failed then to establish the necessary philosophy or stewardship policies and goals defining the path forward for all the future designated caretakers. Over time, when turning our attention to maintenance, as it did, we incorporated methods current to that time that evolved into certain management practices and actions. New conservation science was revealing to some of us that those practices needed reviewing and possible revision. But then about 1 year ago, the Open Space Committee and this commission received a letter dated October 21st of 2016. It was from town attorney stating that going forward, any and all maintenance, management of open space areas be conferred solely on the Conservation Commission, and discussion of such became absent in the Open Space Committee agendas. Now, I have to say here that the references as explained and applied in the town attorney's letter were ambiguous to me. They were citing state statutes regarding powers that could be conferred not only on the Conservation Commission, but also on a Forest Commission. And I found, and that was cited in 7-131 of the state statutes by the attorney in his letter. And I found a Forest Commission mentioned echoed in our own charter in section 605. Now, I'm not quite sure how all of this happened or by whose authority, but I will take that issue, and for clarification, I need to do that for myself. Meanwhile, because of my deep interest, I followed this important conversation and discussion here, and I feel very privileged that you have allowed and welcomed my participation. Now I'd like to tell you my purpose in sharing all of this. In just 6 more days, the Board of Selectmen will be meeting and appointing all the members of the Open Space Committee as restructured by recent charter revision, with 3 additional and new members to be seated at their next meeting. It's just 2 weeks away. And in just 6 more days, the Board of Selectmen will be approving the nominations of those filling the vacancies that you have on this commission. And they will be seated at your next meeting, just 2 weeks away. Collectively, all of these new members, as designated caretakers of our conserved lands, will need orientation to assist them in fulfilling their new duties and responsibilities. It is my personal observation and recommendation that this affords us an excellent opportunity to continue these important deliberations, but perhaps collaboratively, in a subcommittee with combined membership of both groups, informed historically from the beginning and infused with current conservation science knowledge. I thank you for letting me share this with you, and I have a copy for you.
Thank you, Helen. I know you have a unique perspective on this whole thing, having been involved.
Say that again.
You have a unique, thank you for sharing your unique perspective on this. I know you've been involved with these issues for many years. It is interesting that it has fallen to us to take on this task.
To formulate the task.
What?
To formulate
the
the
task, yes.
So I had a question for John.
Yes.
If we can go back to that.
Yes.
So in your, now, I'm sorry, you have to bear with me for 1 second because I'm shifting gears, so let's just listen to Helen. But on your statement, you're basically thinking that we should really not do anything and wait until the master plan is formulated before making a recommendation. Is that a summary?
Yeah.
So the question I had for you is until you said that, we were kind of on a path to point out places that we thought that we saw a lot of synergy with past plans and to focus on a couple of areas that we thought really needed more input from outside sources, more input from the public. We're thinking about different kinds of forms as we're talking about things like invasive species, control, some other pieces like that. Are you recommending now that we don't proceed with highlighting some of those big issues and wait until the master plan addresses all those? Or do we think we should maybe start to think about those while we're putting that together?
I think that should be part of the master plan process.
Okay.
And one thing I was thinking of that I didn't include in there, I didn't want to get too wordy, but one thing is that the master plan process is going to have a consultant who hopefully will understand all these issues that the town needs to address, and its open space, all the different types of open space it has. And they will probably have historic background examples of where they've done a similar sort of thing before. So rather than this commission going ahead and sort of reinventing the wheel, it would seem logical to me to wait until that person can provide guidance and that what you've been talking about become part of that process.
So let me rephrase what I was saying. Let me see. So what I was thinking was, is as in all the work that we've worked on here, we've kind of highlighted 3 or 4 areas that we really think need to be addressed as we move forward towards a master plan. So I could imagine us going back and saying, we don't recommend any particular action on this parcel because it's violated some of our philosophies. It shouldn't be considered in a vacuum. It should be considered with the other pieces. But there's also 3 or 4 things that we think really need to be addressed. We don't have to say how they're being addressed. But, one of them has been things like the invasive species. Other one has been some kinds of, I think invasive species was one of the bigger ones, but things like habitat or wildlife inventory, et cetera, were things that we all think should be done, or I should say we all think, that there has been a lot of discussion that people think that there need to be more of those that were in the forestry plan. It seems to me that pushing those forward in a statement, that goes back to the selectmen, because they've asked us for a comment about this plan, that seems to be a much better tactic to get those things addressed than to basically recommend no action right now, wait for the master plan and wait for this process to spin up again with, a bunch of new people probably getting to the same kind of conclusions in a year or two. So that was, I think, so when I heard what you said, that was the concern I had. So do you think I have a reasonable perspective, or you think I'm missing the point?
No, I misunderstood the way you said it the
Okay.
first time. To include that in the recommendation to the commission.
Okay.
That these are areas that you think should be followed up on.
Okay,
That's perfectly valid, and maybe that will get it into the RFP and make sure it comes to the attention of the consultant.
okay, okay,
Yeah,
so,
that's perfectly valid.
okay, so that seems reasonable.
So that gets to the process, I mean, when do we need to get information to the consultant? What is the schedule for the RFP for the open space?
I had actually, you have Jerry Toner is in attendance. Maybe ask Jerry since,
It's been really put on hold as of the last open space committee. There was really no direction on it. I assume when the new town manager comes in, I think that'll probably be, or for me, it'd be one of the, certainly the higher priorities that I would, try and get direction on, or from the first selectman of the open space committee, in that committee. But I think the town manager certainly needs to be brought up to speed on this. I think it's something that she will want to.
Well, just clarify that again for me, if I may ask the question. You're talking about the master plan,
Yes, the open space master
and
plan.
it's been put on the back burner. Is that what I understood?
Yeah, I really have had no direction on how to
Is it
proceed.
possible that because we're now, in transition with town government and everything?
Yes, I think that's probably the main reason for
It
it.
would make sense that might be,
Yeah.
part of the reason.
Yes,
I think, I wouldn't use the word put on hold because of the transition in the first selectman seat and the two town manager. We just haven't done anything with it because, hypothetically, 3 months ago, we could have had one direction from then first selectman. We have a new first selectman with a change in powers with the town manager. I think to just wait a little bit, and within a month or so, we're gonna have new people going on. The Open Space Committee, at our last Board of Selectmen meeting, we set up, if you will, a process how to add those new people. Basically, it's gonna be 3 new people, be 1 Democrat, 1 Republican, 1 unaffiliated, to add to that committee. But that was just resolved not even 2 weeks ago, just over a week ago.
And you have the new member, which would be also the chair of the Culture, Parks and Rec, which adds another dimension, so we have, a rather new structure.
and here we have 4, sometimes 5 people. We're certainly not up to full speed, and we're looking to get new people.
Should be much closer after our next meeting,
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
at least from our efforts.
Thank you. It's hard to make quorum. It is an interesting time. It seems hard for us at this point to go into a great, a detail on a specific piece of land and what could be. The forest management plan for Onion Mountain was, how old is it now? 5 years?
I'm going to say probably 2 or 3 anyway.
Because I know I was actually on the Open Space Commission at that point, and I think I voted to say, yeah, sure, it looks like a good idea. And
It
that
actually
subsequently
came,
changed.
I
my
remember
mind.
the draft of the various plans came for the final review in front of Conservation, and there were comments
Yes.
added into those plans based on your comments. I do recall that, so I could pull them out, but I lose track, but I'm going to probably guess 3 or 4.
The official date I have it is 2014,
Yeah.
but it was a year on the business.
Yeah.
it was out to bid in July of 2015.
Okay.
So, and that was, let's say, 8-9 months after Eric went before this commission
Yeah.
and presented the plan.
will, aside from just making comments for towards the RFP, I mean, the language is so important in an RFP. One of the things Helen presented last time was that the language for the RFP for Onion Mountain was that it was, and the forester who wrote the Onion Mountain RFP, or proposal, followed that language, and that was to generate income to help, fund some of the
Well, it was to
improvements.
consider.
It was to consider that.
How to generate income.
Consider it.
Which I think, as I look back on it, that was a very good RFP. It gave us a broad range of inventory. They talked about
It did give us an inventory.
inventory, they gave us a broad range of inventory, they gave us a couple different plans, and then we got the information
Yeah.
that we needed to evaluate.
But what would the plan have come back if it had been, that economic consideration had been taken out?
Then you would still be asking that question. That's why it was a good RFP. We don't have to execute on that.
No, exactly.
But you would, somebody, somewhere, should have asked the question, are there resources within this?
Yes.
To help pave, let's just say we thought that the world's best thing to happen was to have paved parking lots. But I think what you've heard is that you had a good description of what was going on, and given our time, how we're evaluating it now, we have the information to make these evaluations.
Well, we have evaluation based on that RFP.
Yep.
I don't think we have the wildlife component, those sorts of things. I think if the argument had been given in the RFP that we could, we're looking to improve the habitat of X, Y, or Z, it would have come out as a different plan.
Well, no, I think there'd be a different component in part of it. I don't think anything else that you saw in there would have changed. The inventory wouldn't have changed. There just would have been an additional part.
The inventory wouldn't change, yes, although I don't know that they would have called them crop trees.
Right, maybe, so your point's well taken, is that when you're going back to ask for things.
What
need to
you
make
ask
sure-
for makes a big difference.
Right, and that you wanna cast a wide enough net to give you information to make decisions.
Yes.
But I don't think that when we cast these things, we're looking, I mean, maybe we are, but this is a good question. Are we looking to get something back so that it absolutely gives us all the information, we just rubber stamp it and go? Or is it a way to give us information, have a discussion?
I think it gives us enough information to have a discussion.
That's right.
I don't know, I agree with you, I don't think it's something that we can rubber stamp.
Yeah, right.
And it has led me to, when I first saw it, I didn't know much about the RFP process and the forest, and I thought, well, look, it looks good on its face. I was wondering if any of you have had a chance to look at the Masako.
Yeah, who found this?
I did.
You did. I thought, yeah, I did get a chance to skim through it, and I thought this was an interesting example of a different approach to
Yes.
forest management.
Yes.
than
I
what
mean,
we
they were
want.
definitely saying, we want to see what happens this way, and so we're going to do this. We want to manage for this particular wildlife, and so we're going to do this.
Yeah,
I
well,
found it an interesting,
but also there, I
and
mean,
considering that it was done by the Department of, the foresters, it wasn't necessarily about generating forest products.
oh, no, I thought it was pretty clear that the goal was to generate revenue.
It was, but that is the goal of a forest. I mean, but they also did specify what sort of habitats they wanted to generate, and identified it much more clearly, I thought, in their, for a state forest, which is interested in generating, lumber, timber products.
Oh, well, no, I mean, here we are, the 10-year goals. I mean, they have a
Yes.
list of goals,
Yes,
and it is favor the growth of white pine
yeah.
on suitable
Well, that was
sites
what
to
the
produce
historical
stands
was. That
of
was-
high-quality saw
yeah.
timber.
And when you look at the history, that's what this thing was established for.
Oh, but those are the goals of the,
Yeah, but it was also, if you look at the
Those are the current
history,
goals, too,
the
right?
history was, that's what it was established for in the first place.
right,
So,
right.
they're
No,
continuing their
what I'm
goal.
saying though is that the entire plan, I mean,
Yeah.
this is the goal.
Yes.
This is their current goal, it's not
Well,
just
that's their
historical.
historic, but that was their historical goal, so
But
they're
it's their
continuing.
current goal,
But
too.
they're also doing other things besides that. I mean, they have identified other goals within that goal. So I just thought it was a more complete, a more robust.
When I look at the goals, though, I mean, so many of these are, these
Similar.
objectives, no, I think there's so many that are built around
They're-
harvesting timber.
They are, but then so is ours. I mean, a lot of ours is, the one
Ours-
that we have, the Onion Mountain, I did not find anything in there about habitats. I mean,
Onion Mountain had one goal, generating revenue,
Yeah.
and directly managing the forest to produce that revenue. I mean, this one's got, almost all of these goals are to minimize the loss of timber and fuel wood, to provide monetary returns to the state of Connecticut, to
Yes.
provide the general public with the opportunity to cut fuel wood.
Because
I mean,
it is
these
a
are
forest. This is what it's supposed to be. It's a state forest. What I'm
These are-
saying, so what I'm saying is, unless the town wants to get into doing it like the state forest does, I don't think we have the expertise that the state foresters do. And we will be turning it over to, a timber harvester. But I don't necessarily know that we have the expertise that the state foresters do to manage, and I'm not sure that we want to manage our forests in such a way.
Oh, absolutely not.
No, that's what I'm saying, but this is, I found that after reading it, the Onion Mountain plan was sort of like a light version and not a particularly good version of this plan.
I'm going to disagree with you on that point, because I
Well,
think.
on this-
let me get it out here, and I just want to compare the goals here for the two, because I think that this is
What
important.
page, excuse me, what page are you looking at the goals?
Page 21.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know why they put the goals halfway through the document instead of at the front, but found them. I mean, in the Onion Mountain plan, the goals are to engage in sound, sustainable land stewardship, provide suitable recreational opportunities, conserve soil and water resources, maintain sensitive or special areas as reserves, protect cultural resources, maintain and improve forest and ecosystem health, protect and enhance diverse wildlife habitat. Those are the first 7
Those are
goals.
lovely, I just don't
But
find
those
them in the plan.
Oh, so I think that, comparing the goals of the two plans.
But that's not what I was really saying. I was saying that in the document itself, the goals are laudable. I just did not find the actual discussion of them in the Onion Mountain thing. If you look on page 13 of the Masako, critical habitat, they actually say which species they want to, which species they have, and they want to preserve certain areas for those species. I didn't find any of that in the Onion Mountain.
No, I think that the Onion Mountain plan did not do as thorough a job
As
of
the Masako.
identifying wildlife.
And this is a state forest where they're looking to knock down trees. Also, one of the things I found interesting, they addressed the 2011 storm, and they talked about how that would open up the canopy as well. We didn't really get that. I don't know whether the Onion Mountain came after the 2011 storm. And that would naturally open up the canopy, and it also provides, some of those dead trees then become wonderful spots for the woodpeckers and all the animals that will use those dead trees. We don't really have to knock them down. I mean, that's wonderful habitat for those animals. I found that they did address the impact of the 2011 storm in this, but not in the Onion Mountain plan. I just thought it was, yes, yeah.
I believe the point you're trying to make about it's historical, what goes on in the Saco State Forest. If I remember correctly from reading that plan, and it's been, how long have we been doing this, a year, 9 months, whatever it was that I read it last. But if I remember correctly, what hit me on that was that Masako is sort of like the Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station for the Forestry Department. It's where they do testing
Yes.
for forestry methods and they use it as examples for foresters throughout the
Yeah.
state. So they can come and say, this was an oak forest, and over the last 20 years, we turned it into a pine
Yeah.
forest. If that's what you want to do, because now pine is more valuable than oak, follow our procedure and it'll all come down.
That's right. It was,
So they're.
they have a definite plan what they want to do with it, yes.
Not, they weren't trying to preserve it for passive recreation
No.
necessarily.
No.
No.
No, what I was
Or,
saying.
or wildlife
No,
habitat.
they wanted to do it because they're a state forest. That's what state forests do. But I found their analysis of what they wanted to do a lot more compelling than our explanation of what we wanted to do on Onion Mountain. We wanted to just thin out some trees and, and the fact that they're called crop trees concerns me because that means they have some economic value, so we'll take them out and we'll encourage something else to grow. And that's not a plan. That's just a harvesting of the more valuable trees to generate income. And I don't know that that's a plan.
Well, I mean, I don't think that's a fair reading of the Onion Mountain plan.
I think that's the result, the fair reading of the ultimate result.
In the Onion Mountain plan, it seemed clear to me that the purpose of cutting trees is to enhance the habitat and to promote the other goals in the
But the
plan.
habitat for what?
Well, they were talking about the wildlife in the back here, right?
Yeah, but they
Right.
don't really say what habitat.
Well, they were talking about deer, turkey, songbirds, bird of prey, small
No,
mammals.
no, no, you
reptiles.
can't just say songbirds, because it depends what kind of songbirds. It depends, are you doing thicket birds, are you doing forest birds, are you doing grassland birds, what kind of songbirds? There are so many different kinds of songbirds.
I mean, one of our comments that everybody seems to agree on is that a more careful biological survey of the forest should be part of the plan.
Which gets me to the whole point of, I think we've got the cart before the horse. You can't talk about cutting down trees unless you know what you're cutting them down for.
Right, but I think we agree with that.
And the other thing, they talk about scarification of the ground so that they can encourage the cottonwoods. Well, why?
But so those are items that we would go back to the selectmen about this particular plan.
Yeah.
And itemize, these are the things that we think, need to be readdressed.
I think, if I may, if you look at the goals, I think that
Those are fine.
it is, well, but the goal is to, protect and enhance diverse wildlife habitat. So what it doesn't say is we want a diverse range of species.
Well, it
Right.
doesn't identify what kind of habitat.
Well, there's lots of different habitats that
Well,
are
there
discussed
are.
in here.
Yeah, but
But it
it doesn't go,
doesn't-
it doesn't go down to that level of detail.
No, it doesn't.
Right.
So what I'm
Well-
saying is, in if you want to have a management plan for a thing, you have to know what you're managing it for. The way the plan, I think, is set up is it's managing it to get harvestable timber so that you can then maybe have enough money to do some other incidental things. I don't think that's a management strategy. I think that's just a way of earning some income. I think if we wanted to go back to the selectmen, we would say, we want to, there's a need in this town for managing for thickets, there's a need for managing for old growth, there's a need for managing grassland. That's on the higher level. And then we say, which piece of property would best fit that? I'm not against cutting, I'm just saying, what are we cutting it for? If it's just to raise money so we have revenue to do some invasive plant removal, we could go back to the first selectman and say, perhaps there's another way of getting income. And we're not talking large amounts of money, I think $40,000 or something, maybe tops. I mean, that's something we could go back, without saying we have to cut these trees to get new trees. We've got the cart before the horse. It's a lovely plan for cutting down trees, but it's not a plan for habitat management. Yes.
Yeah, just from a historic perspective, for the fact that I was involved from the beginning when this was first
Yeah.
implemented, and under two different administrations, it was mandated that this program be self-sustaining.
That's it.
And I will tell you, that the other side of it is that we had, after, this was initiated in the early 90s, and we did, out of the plans that came out, we did, I think, harvests. We did 2 harvests on 2 sections of Onion Mountain. The plan stipulated nothing be done at Belden Forest. The property off of Farms Village Road, up across from the high school, adjacent to Stratford Park, I'm drawing a blank on the name of it. And there was one other, but after those were all done, I will tell you, probably for a period of 5 to 6 years, when Mrs. Glassman was in her second term, we talked about that regularly, and she directed me, and her board directed me to pursue it. And the reason we didn't for all that time was the timber market was depressed.
That's it. Yeah.
And it could not generate adequate revenue to do, to do any improvement. So that was the only reason, and so, certainly the selectmen can change. But for a long period of time, this was a mandate.
Yeah.
Of the program.
And that drove how we manage. If you have to have some income,
It did.
if that's the only way if it's mandated, that's the only way you can get income. But the question is that the only way we can get
It's
income?
not. You know where that came from, I will tell you, is that, there were other municipalities who were doing, Avon had been had run on that model for a long time. That was really where it came from. Since then, other towns have followed suit, but Avon was kind of the one that we followed at the time, and that was really how they did it. Everything, it was a self-sustaining program, and so from the town standpoint, certainly from the selectmen's standpoint, they were looking at it saying, okay, we think it's great, we're not going to put money into it, we want to make sure that, and if that model can be followed, then we think it's a good thing. Now, I thought they all did their due diligence at the time on the different plans. I think everyone seemed to be, be good with by and large, and we received, quite a bit of public input on it. By and large, I thought, it was successful. But again, there was a gap there when, for that good 5 or 6 year period when, as I say, when the market was depressed. And, and then I was directed, once it did, I did get word that it came back, and I was directed to.
It makes sense. The only thing, I think we have an opportunity now to review it and say, is money that we raise from selling forest products, is that the main motivator for how we manage get money to manage the forest? Is that the only way we can get money? And if it weren't the only way to get money, how would we do it differently? Yes.
May I? I think Jerry's absolutely right. What happened historically is absolutely right. It's just that my feeling is that we need to think differently. I keep bringing up conservation science is different today. There is a different way of looking at what we should be doing. Now, I think the most compelling reason why any of you should say to the Board of Selectmen anything about the Onion Mountain Plan comes from this perspective, and that is, there are landowners, state, your group, what do you call it?
Land trust?
Come on.
Trust.
The citizens, yes, the land trust, thank you. Municipal and private.
Yeah.
Now, the issue is that just as you were talking about how the state has their own goals as to how they look at their parcels, and they have reasons for doing the things that they do, I'm asking that we really re-examine, we are the landowners, and if we're going to speak about forests alone, look at those 4 forests, look at the plans that were generated 4 or 5 years ago, and say to ourselves, now you have 4 forests, and those plans were all identical, saying that they were going to achieve the same thing. They were going to do 2 things, basically, in my thinking. Number 1, generate some money, because that was what we thought we should do at that time. The other thing that would be doing to those 4 forests, if you follow those 4 plans, would be to be perpetuating in all 4 of them to be early successional forests. As landowners of this municipality, I think we need to look at those four forests and decide our goals. What do we want to do with this land? Do we want to look at it like the state looks at theirs? Do we want to look at it differently? And I am suggesting that, what if you say that particular plan goes forward because it's already been marked and it's been several years since it's been marked? It probably has to be remarked, right? You have to go back and revisit it. What if you execute this plan at this point in time? What if we eventually look at those four forests and maybe that particular style of management should be to one of the other pieces, not that one. Maybe you're doing it to the wrong one. We don't know that yet. That's what I'm pushing for. That the goals that we should have established years ago when we set up this program, it should have followed so that we had some kind of blueprint to drive our ethic about how we wanted to perceive our lands. That we shouldn't be following somebody else's because that's the way they do it. I think we have to decide for ourselves as landowners of these parcels how to put a value to them. Maybe Onion Mountain has this specific value and should be managed this way. The other three individually should receive value. What value system will we put to each of the four? And then we have a picture. And you say, well, we're going to treat this one because it has wonderful opportunity to, let's say, perpetuate the biodiversity or the animals that have been established there. This one needs help. Maybe it doesn't have a more defined thing. The third one could be the old growth forest possibility. We have to do that first before we do anything to them. That's my premise, and that's what I'm pushing for. And that's the most compelling reason why we don't do it right now. The forest will be there. Let's just be sure that we do it right.
And we do have some good inventory information from the management plans that, you know, that have been submitted. The question is that exactly what we want to do?
Well, no, so let's be very clear on what our questions are.
Yeah.
Like, I thought that we were supposed to give a recommendation on the Onion Mountain plan and how it should be. We were supposed to give our view of what the Onion Mountain plan is back to the selectmen.
Mm-hmm.
And so at a very extreme, you could say, execute the Onion Mountain plan, you know, as is. But in the last year, I haven't heard anybody say that's what we should do. No. So I think that worrying about executing that as is not on the table from anybody here. So we have gone through a procedure by which we say we wanted to evaluate the Onion Mountain plan within the context of all the other spaces. And we've basically talked about the other the other three forests and the open space. And that was in a series of our philosophy goals. So it seems to me that we are very close to being able to summarize, you know, here's how we think about it, here's where we find this thing lacking, here are the things that we believe the selectmen should be thinking about as they start to move forward and think about of this. We can wrap up like a 3 or 4 page note back to the selectmen. Mm-hmm. And to have all this stuff isolated for what their next steps should be. But one of them can easily be this thing should not be executed as is until these other things have been addressed. And then we've achieved at least that initial goal.
Okay. Unfortunately, we have Mike with us tonight.
Sure.
Is that something is that what the selectmen would want?
I think what the selectmen are looking for is not as specific. I think kind of a range that we are going to, my words, not yours. Mm-hmm. We are going to handle the different forests, not the open space, but the forests in different ways because they are different. There are differences between them. I also was thinking, in a perfect world, Jerry is absolutely right that while the forest cutting down of the trees was really a money-raising piece of the puzzle, it was really not, it was a means to an end. And that was not, the cutting down of the trees was really just a way to make up a little bit of the shortfall.
Yeah.
And
How critical is it that the money come from management of the timber
I don't
harvesting
believe we're
forest?
talking a lot of money. My experience or recollection is, if you're talking $10,000 or $20,000
Yeah.
in the total
Yeah.
puzzle, the whole cost of it might be $40,000.
Onion Mountain, the bid was for $13,765.
Yeah.
So that's the value on that.
Yeah.
For the cutting?
Yep.
Right.
It was from David Moon.
I mean, it's not a lot of cutting,
And
but
we
it
got
also.
nothing for it, correct, Mike?
Yeah, he walked from the project.
Yes. And
Well,
you-
actually, you shouldn't say we got nothing from it.
What was our
He
net?
did
That's a better way to put it.
well, he did a down payment of $2,753, his 20% deposit. We had to pay $1,000 for the forester to mark the site, so I mean, we broke even in the sense that his deposit at least covered the cost for having Eric Hansen out marking the trees. We did not, Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, we didn't refund his deposit, correct?
No.
Because Eric was paid to go out and mark those trees.
Right, yeah.
So it's not exactly a moneymaker. Also, there were problems with the neighbors that didn't want.
Which, from my perspective, not that as a selectman, I don't care about that.
Yeah.
But the project should be set up so that here are the rules, here's what you're gonna
Yeah.
do, here's what you're gonna pay or get paid to do a job.
Yes.
But we need to know going in that, I'll pull a number out of the air, it's gonna be $15,000 to do this job, and we're gonna get $2,500 back. I'm just throwing numbers out there.
I'm sorry, Mike.
No, go right ahead, Jerry.
No, I was just say that really what broke down there with the logger was the conditions we put on him.
Yes.
He was not willing to meet, and to the point of, granted, you've got adjacent homeowners, we restricted him to just cutting, I'm gonna say between 8 and 5, Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
And because of he wanted to go 7 days a week,
Yeah.
and that was really the
Yeah.
deal breaker.
Yeah.
So,
But in all cases, what was that money gonna go towards?
And was it earmarked?
there was gonna be, I believe, some trail work, probably some trail enhancements, some trail work, and that was the biggest thing, probably the biggest enhancement, or one of the major enhancements that came out the first time was the integrated trail system in there. Before, there had never been any on either side. So, some upgrades to the trail system. I believe there was gonna be some planting. We were gonna try and do, we had done some environmental education programs up there. We've done them there in Belden Forest, and then, of course, you have the supervision of, we wanted the forester to be on site a fair amount to make sure that, in addition to Mike and us, that there was adequate, controls on it. So
Yeah, I
it
never.
was pretty low, it was a low, pretty low budget.
But would there have been money to do, build a few trails?
I would think that we could set up, thinking kind of Mike's perfect world, let's put it that way. The Board of Selectmen would approve a project. Part of the project would be that the funds that come in get reinvested into the town's open space in some fashion. We may take money from this forest to work on a trail over here or to do something. Whatever income we get is spent within that context.
But does it have to come from timber products?
I think if someone wants to write us a check, we're not gonna say no.
No.
That's how we're building the
I
basketball
mean,
court,
a
so.
lot of these things are tend to be like rather small ticket items. Is there another funding mechanism other than sale of trees?
Realistically,
I know budgets are tight.
I think it's going to be tough for the next 2, 3, 4 years to have any surplus dollars. That said, I think we can plan on stuff if we can get grants or do something. We got some really good creative folks here in town, on staff and elsewhere. To the extent we can, I think we want to try to. I think the Board of Selectmen would be very supportive of that. I know I would. You know, I want to see us, what's the word I want? Enhance the assets we've got and not let them deteriorate so much that now that forest is really just overgrown with invasives and everything else.
Yeah, the
Nobody
invasive,
wants
the
that.
invasive, one of the concerns with doing the logging is also, and this has happened with other land trusts and other towns, is once you open up that canopy, a lot of the invasives are sun-loving species, so you've actually made more work for yourself by doing the cutting. And, you know, that's something I think we need to have a go-slow approach to, because while we might be intending one thing, the results might be quite a different thing. And that's where I think the new research comes in. I know there's invasive plant councils, and, you know, they could definitely give us more input. In Belden Forest, when you're down in the middle of Belden Forest, you don't see many invasive plants. We take out some of those trees, you'll see invasive plants. Yeah.
Yeah, two things, and that was one of the things that I had neglected, and without having the plan in front of me, and I wish I did, but I know the whole issue of existing invasives in Onion Mountain. Well, that was one of the other things that was gonna be addressed, but beyond that, I think the bigger issue with invasives, and the next proposed plan was to go into the Ethel Walker Woods property, where there is a much more significant problem with invasives, and I think that was really, you know, our concern, that I think it would have required, it does require, you know, more resources to address the problem there.
I think so.
And again, that had historically been an actively managed, and when Ethel Walker owned it, they did active manage. That was how I believe the trail system, you know, came about there. So this was really I think a continuation of something that had been done there. But I will tell you, I mean, without looking at I know the invasives are a bigger issue there, and more resources would need to be put towards
And one
this.
of the things, I can't help it, every time I drive by Onion Mountain and I see the parking lot and it's just red with burning bush, I can't help but notice the burning bush that are down the street in all the various homes. You know, it's sort of a ridiculous task for the town to take out the invasives while, you know, people are madly planting these things in their yard. And that goes to, you know, we need a strategy as a town to address, you know, some of these issues. Yeah.
I understand how Mike is drawing the picture that, you know, there may be some attention needed at a certain forest because of invasives. But you have invasives at Ethel Walker, I think I'm speaking correctly, to the greater extent because the canopy had been disturbed. Okay, if you go and disturb the canopy more, all you're doing is perpetuating or increasing or introducing new invasives. If you need to really attack the invasive issue, you need to look at it scientifically and really address it carefully with today's new thinking. Find a way to do it, but do no harm while you're trying to take care of that problem. So I'm suggesting that we don't know yet. Even in the Onion Mountain Plan and all of those four plans that I read, even the forester suggested in certain areas in those plans that we needed to look at this, we needed to look at that, we needed to assess this. There were several. We hadn't done that yet anyway, so we didn't even follow his suggestions and his advice. So I'm saying that for the most compelling reason, that you send forward a message to the Board of Selectmen, that it is not the time to do it now, and that we need to do more work in so many other ways, and other thinking, and it'll be okay.
And perhaps get an RFP from someone with a different perspective, with, you know, rather than focusing on the tree removal, but look at it as a forest system and how we can improve that system, not just by, I know the goal is to remove the larger trees so that the younger trees can grow up, but in some cases,
You don't need to.
you know,
They'll fall
it's not,
down eventually.
the younger trees are not there because there's not enough holes in the canopy. They're not there because the deer are eating them all. So removing the trees won't necessarily solve that problem anyway.
I remember when he was here and we had some discussion about the deer exclosures. Is that what we call them?
Yeah. Yeah, the exclusion from the,
Yeah.
exclusion fencing.
Right, yeah, the native
Yeah.
kind of fencing around the young trees.
Yeah, but that's
No, I
on a
didn't-
forest level, that's just so hard.
I don't think I saw any of that in the
Onion Mountain.
Onion Mountain
No.
plan.
Yeah,
But that's another expense, not only the construction, but the maintenance.
yeah.
And so, and I was also wondering, Mike said there was $1,000 for Jim Hansen to mark the trees. Didn't he get paid to prepare the plan?
Yeah, but the marking is different.
But there was, I'm just saying, if they got 13,000 something from the logger, minus the 1,000 for marking, minus however many thousand he got for preparing the plan, plus the cost of the deer enclosures, pretty soon you're gonna add up and your costs are
And then the
gonna
question
wash.
is, does the town have the money to do these sort of management?
Right.
We have to look at, need to look at other ways of doing things, period. It just, we have to renew our,
We might not have enough trees to cut
Information.
down to manage all the things that we need to manage. So it might be, there are a lot of, there are a lot of, these things are horribly complex. And the plan seemed, wonderfully simple. But I don't know that it gets us to where we want to be.
Yeah. Well, maybe a really clear recommendation that we should be making is that none of this, certainly none of this cutting take place until there's a plan and funding for a plan to manage
Look
the
at
effects of it.
Well, I would say that if we had done our job well with our philosophy and our big goal statement, that you would be able to say you wouldn't do anything until you've addressed those issues.
Yes.
That a plan has addressed and is aligned with those goals. And so our philosophy statement to date has been that requires public input, that, we're treating it as a townwide entity problem, it's not as individual parcels. And if you go back and look at the three goals that we're trying to do, there was nothing about, maximizing revenue. There was nothing about revenues. It was about evaluating these things for the wildlife habitat, for, recreational opportunities when possible. I can't remember what the third one was now, but there was, it seems to me that we've actually articulated at least some of these things, and that can go back. I mean, we often get into these very tactical discussions about what's the best way to do things, which I really think should be left, to the open meetings that we need to have about these. We're not gonna be able to solve them here.
No.
And we can highlight some of them as examples. But I really think that we're at the point that we can closely get a recommendation that goes back to the selectmen so they can start to proceed. Drawing it out longer and longer here keeps us from moving forward on
I agree.
the plan.
I agree. It might also, I know the open space is going to be having these discussions too.
our next meeting is the day after your next meeting, is 2 weeks away. You meet on Tuesday and we meet on Wednesday.
Wednesday, yeah.
6, 7, I think it's about the 6th or 7th of June. Wow. February.
Well, that warm
I'm looking
weather.
for warmth. 6th or 7th of February, I think. So,
7th.
7th, okay. But you meet on the Tuesday, we meet on the
But
Wednesday.
I agree with you, Charles. I just think perhaps the tactic of this RFP is not the best tactic for
Absolutely.
solving those issues.
But I think that becomes very clear in the goals that we've stated in the overall philosophy.
Yeah.
So I think the only thing that, if you're trying, I think we need to think about the end game of what we want to send back to the selectmen. If we start to think about how to edit that, write that, then that's going to allow us to focus our thoughts and get something back that can be actionable. But I have not heard anybody thinking that executing these plans as is a recommendation.
Yeah, we're not saying they're bad plans, but they're not necessarily the plans that would get us to where we want to be.
Right, and so, but I do think what we owe the selectmen is some examples of things that we think, at higher levels that need to be addressed. Invasive species is one of them,
you know, the different kinds of habitats across the different units. If you
Even
base
identification of the habitats.
identification of habitats, if you just go through and we isolate these things, keep it to a page.
But also, you know, I mean, we're talking about moving beyond habitats
Sure.
too, to actual, you know, diversity of species.
That's
present, right.
Absolutely. So I think if we can set ourselves a page or two, no more than two, at this limit, and say, how do we get this up to a high level that encompasses a bunch of these things, so that they have some idea of
What we're
what to,
thinking.
what to start to think about.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I just wanted to say that the diversity issue, I don't think we can expect diversity on each property. It reminds me of my son when he went
Yeah.
to Syracuse. He was asked on his college application, how are you going to bring diversity to, you know, Syracuse University? I thought, you can't bring diversity to Syracuse. It's up to the admissions group that is, you know, choosing which applicants they want. And I think that's true with our forest. We can't expect every forest to have the diversity. I mean, one might be a pine forest, one might be an oak forest. I mean, that would be, you know, diversity, but we can't manage each property to have all the diversity.
And that's why.
That's why we have to pull back and look at what's going on town-wide, I
Right.
think.
Yeah, but I mean, I think even, you know, I mean, any, you know, mature forest is going to have, you know,
Yeah.
a diversity of habitats
Yes,
within, I
yes.
mean, in a general
Well,
sense.
just with the topography we've got in town, you're gonna get.
Right, but I mean, you've got multiple levels of
Yes.
trees, you've got,
Yeah.
you know, canopy, you've got understory, you've
And
got,
some are
you know,
going to have
snags
more
in
than
your-
others, yes, some are gonna have more than others. So, yeah, I think we're getting there.
But, you know, but also the, you know, I mean, the shift though is from looking at trees to looking at trees plus animals, right?
Well, I think, you know, the plants drive the animals, so we need to know which animals are we, you know.
Well, that was the way I first, you know, that I first read this, was that this, you know, that this is really focused on creating
Yeah,
habitat
but it doesn't say which one.
and evaluating habitat.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, different tree species and multiple age stands and snags and
Yes.
overturned trees.
But sometimes
and those are
you
different
need.
habitats, right?
Sometimes you need, you
Is-
know, one that's a solid age stand and a younger age stand nearby or something like that. So it depends what's around it too.
Sure, sure. But I mean, you know,
we've got-
my point though is that, you know, if we want to do, you know, a significant inventory of the biology that's present, the animals that are present, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that would be necessary to say, okay, we've got, you know, we're going to, you know, enhance the diversity of the wildlife that's present. Right. Otherwise, I mean, what's the purpose of
Yeah.
doing an inventory of the wildlife?
No.
If
Yeah,
that's not
no,
a goal
I mean,
and if that's not.
It depends
something we're evaluating.
what you're trying to, I mean, if you wanted to have woodcocks, I mean, you're gonna manage it one way. If you're gonna have pileated woodpeckers, you're gonna have to manage it another way. You know, each different species needs a different sort of, I mean, there are groups of them and have similar habitats. But, yeah, I think we need to look at it as a habitat issue.
So, okay.
All right, so we're agreed, all right.
No, well, no,
Sorry, no?
I'm still confused because
All right.
I thought that you wanted to have a really comprehensive review of the wildlife that was present. I mean, that was what I understood, was that was one of your central complaints of this
No, my
plan.
central complaint is that it's managing it, but it's not saying what it's managing for.
Well, so, I mean, for habitat, right?
I'm not sure that they're managing for habitat. I think they're managing to take out the crop trees, which, that's what they call them, the crop trees, which
Well,
they don't even
there's still
specify what the crop trees are.
Okay, well, there's still a difference between managing for habitat and managing for wildlife. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
I mean, you can manage for
Yes,
habitat, I
yes,
think, and you
yeah.
still get to that same
Yeah,
end.
you can't. If you manage
just
for
not
habitat, you're
directly
managing for the
measuring.
wildlife. But I don't know that we're in my reading of the Onion Mountain, I'm not sure that they're managing for habitat. I think they're managing for crop trees.
But if it were managed for habitat,
Yeah, but then again, we have to know why we're managing for that particular habitat. I mean, just chopping on down the largest trees and then, you know, getting sort of an age, you know, theoretical and age diversity doesn't necessarily mean you're getting the habitat you want. I mean, knoll growth is a habitat that has certain species of animals too, as does a thicket has certain species of animals. but just randomly going in, I mean, nature will do that anyway. They'll take out certain trees and open up the canopy and do that. I just wonder, do we have enough money as a town to go in and do that management? And do we have the expertise in the town to do that management? Can we hire that expertise? I don't know that do we know what we're managing for? And I just don't see it. And can nature do it? Can nature do it on her own or his own?
Nature will do it on.
Nature will do it regardless. Yeah,
She will.
with less cost.
I guess I'm still a little confused though, because
Yeah, well, this is.
if it's not being managed for wildlife specifically, then what's the value in having an evaluation of the wildlife done for the forest management plan?
No,
Right.
if you have a habitat, the wildlife come. What I'm saying is, just removing certain trees is not managing for a habitat. What's proposed in the Onion Mountain Plan is not necessarily management for habitat. I mean, the argument is, you take out the old trees, and the young trees will grow up, and you'll have this age diversity of stand. That's not necessarily a habitat. What trees are you taking out? Why are you taking them out? Leaving them there, actually, an old dead tree in the forest has more habitat value.
Taking a step back from the Onion Mountain Plan specifically, though.
All right.
I mean, if you're going to manage for wildlife specifically, right, then you need to have an evaluation of what wildlife are there and
And you would manage-
what kind of numbers and exactly where they are. If you want to manage for habitat, right, then you need an inventory of the habitat that's present, which is different from the animals.
Well, you don't necessarily need an inventory. If you create the habitat, often they'll come, depending on what's adjacent to you. For instance, the Canton Land Trust decided to do what they call a bunny cut. They clear cut an area because somewhere nearby in Barkhamsted, there are the New England cottontails, as opposed to the eastern cottontails. The New England cottontails have to have thicket, and so they cut down a whole bunch, because that was their goal. They wanted to, it was part of a DEEP project to increase the habitat. We got a lot of forests that have grown up. We don't have much thicket. So they wanted to chop down that particular forest, not necessarily to generate money, but to generate thicket habitat for the expansion of New England cottontails. I mean, that's what I'm talking about, management. I mean, that's a goal. You can do that. In the Masaka plantation, they were managing for grouse. I mean, certain things they were managing for. And depending on how you want, what animals you want, that's how you manage that forest. It might mean cutting it all down.
I would have answered this a little differently. If your question was, I don't, for instance, if part of our goals is to conserve soil, water, and cultural resources while improving forest ecosystem health and wildlife habitat, I'm not sure that you have to have an active management plan for any one of those things in order to take an inventory of it and know where you stand, or if whatever's happening is changing over time. So I don't see the inconsistency in having an inventory that describes these things and not having necessarily an active plan that goes after one or the other. But you do need the inventory as a way to know where you're starting from at any given time. And that was always one of our goals, was to make sure, or at least in our philosophy statement, was to make sure that we had adequate information about the state of the environment through a regular inventory process.
May I? Absolutely right. And that's where you go when I talk about, you have to know what you have first. And when we have to be careful when we use the term manage. When you say, what are we managing for? Why does man always think they've got to manage? Why don't we first know what is there first? Appreciate it. We set a value on it. And then we determine how we take care of it. Not go in and manage it. Just how do we live with it? Do we monitor it? We don't have to do management.
Well, I think we agreed several meetings ago that management as as a term, in terms of what we're doing, is a fine term, but we all agreed that not doing anything was a style of management. Having active management, we have a lot of goals and a lot of tactics we're gonna go after, and there's something in between. But we described that process of completely leaving it alone or going whole hog on it as still be classified as a management plan. At least that was what we agreed to a little while ago. But I think, so Jim, does that answer your question as to why you can actually take an inventory but not be actively going after something?
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to think in terms of our goals and what we're setting as our goals, right? And I mean, is that going to be a goal, right? Is to improve the diversity of the wildlife that's there.
And maybe habitat connectivity is another, how, does this piece of property connect with other pieces of properties that allow the movement of animals? I mean, that was one of the things we looked at earlier.
Right, well, we've been trying to keep this at a high level so that the individual tactics would you could have once you agree on these things, you have a discussion on the individual pieces without having to go back and change the original ones. At least the high-level goals. Now, nothing I've heard here tonight
Changes that.
changes the 3 or 4 goals that we've been debating about over the last couple of iterations. Almost everything we've been talking about has been tactical. How would you define this particular habitat? Or do we deal with the invasives one way? Or do we use these things to raise money? That's all a tactic. And I guess my only concern is that I think given that there is going to be a change, we're going to start with new people and there's going to be a lot of change in the town, it'd be nice to be able to get to some point where we've kind of wrapped up something and give people something to start with, because we have spent a bunch of time on it.
Well, I think the general goals, I don't know that they have to be hard and fast, but the general goals that and the discussion that we've educated ourselves, which is, we've started with not really knowing, what we were thinking. And I think we've come to that. So that will influence how we go forward. Having a meeting with open space, I think would be a good idea, getting more input from other people. If we could have a joint meeting with the open space committee, because they'll be discussing these things, and especially with the town open space master plan. We've only talked really about the forest management, but there are other pieces of property open space that would also benefit from some sort of discussion.
What may even help you is when you have that open space meeting, is to see if SCTV can tape it. And they could then put that out and at least get the word out. And if you can have, the sooner you can have your, I'm going to call them the general philosophies, that can become the tent cover that everything fits under, and I think that will be very helpful. I commend you, because it's been a long process. I've seen eyes glazed over, my own included. But it's good, because it's not going to be something that is so specific it can get pulled apart one way or the other.
Right.
On the other hand, it's not specific, but I personally believe it needs to be somewhat flexible or inclusive.
And fortunately, we've got the time to do it. I mean, hopefully not every meeting that we're going to do this, because it gets, So let's look again at the goals. Let's do a final look at that and see if we can't discuss that for the next meeting, and see if that's something we might want to put forward to the, rather than a hard and fast thing on the Onion Mountain saying, we want to look at it differently with the goals. What do you think?
Well, and maybe a list of recommendations too.
Yes, that'd be good. All right, so come up together with list recommendations, to see what we can sort of, with the idea that we can get this off our plate and give it to the Board of Selectmen.
Well, no, isn't to get us off the plate, is to get everyone started. I mean, the one thing we've heard about is that we need a lot of public input. There's a lot of things we still don't need to know.
Yeah.
So having it churn around in this committee, or then go to the open space committee, have it churned around for another year there, is not
Yes.
gonna help us as a town.
No,
We've gotta figure out what are the things that we need to learn and get moving on.
no, I was being facetious,
Yeah.
but yes.
Well, no, but I think that was a distinction I had between that I had with John earlier, which is why I didn't want to just say the recommendation is forget about it and wait till the next group to start over. I want to somehow encapsulate what we've learned and send that off at least as a way to summarize the starting point. They can choose to ignore it, but at least we will have added information.
All right.
To your
Yes.
credit, you were not asked to do that, and to your credit, you took it upon yourselves to do that.
Well, we
To-
did have some assistance.
Well, but I'm saying, to your credit, you allowed that process to begin here. And that's why in my remarks earlier, I had that little suggestion that given you're going to have 4 additional individuals on you're going to have 8 members of the open space. You're going to have a full house here, that maybe you can pull out of both 3 people, 4 people who could meet in a subcommittee setting. You can have your people bring your draft of what you've been working on, and it could be a jumping off point to say, bring it together. It's not going to go for waste. Your work has to be part of this next, step.
Next iteration. All right. Well, I think that should be it for this evening. Unless anyone would like to add more.
You just have one other piece of correspondence. You have a notification from Mel Harder for a
Yes.
timber harvest at Dinah Nobel.
Yes.
I've been in contact with this forester and reminded him under statute that although he's working in wetlands, it is an activity that's allowed as of right. He's supposed to come before this commission to get that determination by the commission. This is the most that he's cooperated with my office in giving a correspondence with a map. Because one of the concerns is he has some of his forwarding trails going through areas which are mapped wetland soils. And the first question I'd ask is, what's his best management plans for those areas? He claims that the cut that he's proposing on this property is not within wetlands, but like I said, he's got haul roads going through wetland soils. Is he using corduroy as ground cover? Is he going to use swamp mats, something
Is he
to?
going to be working in the winter as opposed to the summer?
I don't have any, none of this.
So not only he would have to come through for an approval, right?
It's a little different. A permit's not required, so what he would come in before the commission is basically a ruling saying, this is an activity which is permitted as of right. Use your best management practices there. If there's areas of concern, the commission could say, we'd like to advise you in this particular area, could you beef up your ENS? Could you move your haul roads, say there was a stream or some other feature that he was adjacent or in, can you move it so that at least there's a buffer from that area? But it's not a permit or regulated activity that you're normally used to seeing.
More of an advisory or oversight?
It's statute kind of allows foresters working in wetlands. They kind of, local regs, they trump local regs in the sense they don't have to get permits from you. However, saying that, they still have to go before this commission, and staff will have this on your agenda with requesting that Mr. Harder come before us just to say hello.
That's it. You checked the box for grading in here. Do you know what that is?
Could be just the roads, could be the landing area. That's part of my issue. I mean, I have, this is the most information he's received, that he's provided me. The 2 voicemails I had from him was basically, I get to start, consider this your notification, and I had to recite statute word for word to him, saying, that's not how it works.
Would grading be considered as of right? Grading associated with the timber harvest?
Depends. Depends on what exactly what is he claiming on grading. Is this grading that's the landing area, which may be out of your regulated area? Is this temporary grading for crossings because he could do some sort of earthen berm to cross an area and then say, hey, I'm going to remove it when I'm done, which is he cites, there is some guidelines by the state, what activities, the best management practices forests are supposed to implement. It could be he putting water bars in on a hillside that will be exposed on a haul road. That could be considered grading. But once again, we don't have a full idea.
Is it in the statute that he has to follow those best management practices?
Yes, they're regulated by also DEP. So yes, I believe from his licensing standpoint, he has to follow those. So it kind of comes into play. I think the statute just refers to the NS manual, but that's just best management practice, just very general. So,
Right.
But I will inform Mr. Harder that his attendance is requested in 2 weeks.
All right, good. All right, does anyone have anything else to add to tonight's meeting? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much for your input.
Thank you. Input.